Captain Daeho stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the giant screen in front of him. The screen showed empty space filled with stars, but something was wrong. In the middle of all that darkness was a huge alien ship that looked like it was dying. The ship was so big that his own vessel looked like a tiny bug next to it. That alien ship was not moving at all. It just floated there like a dead whale in the ocean. Pieces of metal were floating around it, and Daeho could see big holes in its side. Atmosphere was leaking out of those holes and making white clouds in space. The ship's engines were completely dark and cold. Daeho had been the captain of the human ship Unity for 3 years. Now he was a good captain and his crew trusted him. They had been sent to explore this part of space to look for new planets and resources, but they had not expected to find anything like this. Navigation officer Su Jin was sitting at her station looking at all the numbers and lights on her screen. She was very good at her job and never made mistakes. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she scanned the alien ship. "Sir," she said without looking up from her screen, "we are getting life signs from inside that ship. There are survivors trapped in different parts of it. The readings show maybe 200 or 300 beings still alive." Engineer Ki-woo was standing behind his own control panel. He was the best engineer in the human fleet and could fix almost anything, but when he looked at the readings from the alien ship, he shook his head. "The damage was too much for anyone to repair. That ship belongs to the Vorthok Empire," he said in a quiet voice. Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. The Vorthok were the most dangerous enemies that humans had ever faced. They were huge reptile-like creatures that stood 7 feet tall and had claws that could cut through metal. For the past 5 years, the Vorthok had been attacking human colonies. They came in their giant warships and destroyed everything they found. They took human prisoners and made them fight in gladiator games for entertainment. They had no mercy and showed no kindness to anyone they defeated. Ki-woo continued talking as he looked at the data. "They have been raiding our colonies and killing our people for years. They destroyed New Seoul Station just last month and killed everyone there, including women and children. They took some humans alive to use as slaves." The bridge became very quiet. Everyone remembered the news reports about New Seoul Station. It had been home to 50,000 people, including many families with young children. The Vorthok had attacked without warning and left no survivors. The images from that attack still gave people nightmares. Communications officer Bo Ram was a young woman who had joined the crew only 6 months ago. She was very smart and could speak 12 different alien languages, but she had lost her brother in one of the Vorthok attacks and still felt angry about it. "Captain," she said in a whisper, "any other human ship would just leave them to die. After everything they have done to us, they deserve whatever happens to them. Why should we risk our lives to save creatures that would never help us?" Daeho understood how his crew felt. He had his own reasons to hate the Vorthok. His younger sister Hiram had been living on Mars colony when the Vorthok attacked 2 years ago. She had been working as a teacher at a school for human children. The Vorthok had burned the whole colony and taken some people as prisoners. His sister had never been found. Every night Daeho still had dreams about his sister. He wondered if she was still alive somewhere in Vorthok space, being forced to fight in their arena games. The thought made him angry and sad at the same time. Sometimes he wanted revenge so badly that his hands would shake, but as he looked at the dying alien ship, something else was fighting against his anger. There was a voice in his head that sounded like his sister. She had always told him that being human meant being different from the monsters that hurt people. She believed that humans had to be better than their enemies, even when it was hard. Medical officer Hai Jin was also on the bridge. She was the ship's doctor and had saved many lives during their missions. She was looking at the life sign readings and could see that many of the aliens were badly hurt. Some of them would die soon if they did not get help. She said those readings show that some of the survivors are children. The Vorthok bring their families on their warships. There are young ones trapped in there who have never hurt anyone. Daeho closed his eyes and tried to think clearly. The thing to do would be to leave. The safe thing would be to report the location to the human military and let them decide what to do. His crew would understand, and no one would blame him for making that choice. But when he opened his eyes and looked at the broken ship again, he could not do it. He could not watch hundreds of beings die, even if they were his enemies. There was something inside him that would not let him turn away from suffering. It was the part of him that made him human. The Vorthok had done terrible things to his people. They had killed his sister and destroyed human homes. They had shown no mercy and no kindness to anyone. But that did not mean he had to be like them. That did not mean he had to become a monster too. "The rescue shuttles," he said in a calm voice. "We are going to save them." The entire bridge crew stared at him in shock. Su Jin turned around in her chair and looked at him with wide eyes. Ki-woo stopped working and Bo Ram dropped the datapad she was holding. They could not believe what they had just heard. "Captain, are you serious?" Su Jin asked. "Do you really want to risk our lives to save the same creatures who killed your sister? They would never do the same for us. If we were trapped in a dying ship, they would watch us die and probably laugh about it." "Maybe they would," Daeho replied. "But we are not them. We are human beings, and human beings do not let people die when we can help them. It does not matter if they are our friends or our enemies. When someone needs help, we give it. That is what makes us different." Ki-woo stepped forward. "Captain, this is very dangerous. That ship is breaking apart. We could lose people trying to save aliens who hate us. Our families back home would not understand why we died helping the enemy." Daeho looked at each member of his crew. He could see the fear and confusion in their eyes. They were good people who had followed him on many dangerous missions, but this was asking them to risk everything for beings who would cause them so much pain. "I know this is hard," he said, "but look at that ship, look at those life signs. Those are not just enemy soldiers, those are living beings who are scared and hurt and dying. Some of them are children who have never done anything wrong." Tuhuj walked over to the main screen and pointed at the broken alien vessel. "If we leave them to die, then we become no better than they are. We become the kind of people who can watch suffering and do nothing about it. Is that who we want to be?" Ram was crying now as she thought about her dead brother. "Captain, what if saving them makes us look weak? What if other alien species think humans are easy targets because we show mercy to our enemies? Then let them think that day," Ho said with a small smile. "If being kind makes us look weak, then I would rather be weak than be cruel. We will save these Vorthok because it is the right thing to do. And maybe someday they will remember that humans chose to help them when no one else would." The crew looked at each other and then back at their captain. They had followed him for years and trusted his judgment. Even when they did not understand his decisions, they knew he always tried to do what was right. "Prepare the shuttles," Sujin said as she turned back to her controls. "If we are going to do this, we need to do it fast. That ship will not last much longer." Ki Woo nodded and started getting the rescue equipment ready. Ram wiped her tears and began setting up communication channels to coordinate the rescue team's medical officer. Jin started preparing medical supplies and emergency treatment equipment as the crew prepared for the most dangerous mission of their lives. Daeho looked one more time at the dying alien ship. Inside were hundreds of beings who had been taught to hate humans, beings who had killed human children and destroyed human homes. But they were also living creatures who deserved a chance to survive the day he would show the galaxy what it meant to be human. Captain Daeho put on his environmental suit and checked all the seals. The suit was heavy and made it hard to move, but it would keep him alive in the cold vacuum of space. He had decided to lead the first rescue team himself because he would not ask his crew to do something he was not willing to do. The Unity had 4 small rescue shuttles, and each one could carry about 20 people if they squeezed together tightly. Engineer Ki Woo had modified the shuttles with extra cutting tools and emergency medical equipment. They would need everything they could carry to save the trapped. Vorthrak Sujin was monitoring the alien ship from the bridge, and her readings showed that it was breaking apart faster than they had expected. Whole sections were losing power and atmosphere every few minutes. They had maybe 3 hours before the ship would tear itself apart completely. "Team Alpha, you are clear for launch," Sujin announced over the radio. "Captain Daeho will lead the first team to the main crew quarters. Team Beta will go to the engineering section. Team Gamma will rescue survivors from the damaged hull sections." Ho sat in the pilot's seat of his shuttle with 3 other crew members behind him. Rescue specialist Minho was an expert at getting people out of dangerous places. Medical technician Yan Su carried emergency medical supplies, and security officer Tae Hein was there in case any of the Vorthok tried to fight them. The shuttle flew through space toward the massive alien ship, and Daeho could see how badly damaged it really was. The hull was cracked in dozens of places, and debris was floating everywhere. Some of the holes were so big that he could have flown his shuttle right through them. As they got closer, they could see inside the ship through the broken sections. The lights were flickering and emergency alarms were flashing red. The Vorthok ship looked like it had been hit by asteroids or maybe attacked by another alien species, but there was no sign of what had caused all this damage. Daeho guided his shuttle to a docking port that was still intact. The port was designed for Vorthok ships, so it was much bigger than what they needed, but Minho was able to make the connection work. Emergency power was still running in this section, so they had light and artificial gravity. When they opened the airlock, they could smell something burning and hear the sound of metal groaning under stress. The corridors were filled with smoke, and emergency lights cast red shadows on the walls. Everything looked alien and strange, but they could follow the signs that showed where the crew quarters were located. The first group of survivors they found were 7 Vorthok warriors trapped in what looked like a training room. A heavy beam had fallen across the doorway and blocked their escape. The warriors were huge reptilian creatures with green scaly skin and yellow eyes that glowed in the dark. When the Vorthok saw the humans approaching, they hissed and showed their sharp teeth. They had been taught from birth that humans were weak prey animals that existed only to be hunted and enslaved. The idea that humans would come to rescue them made no sense in their warrior culture. "Here to help," Daeho said through his universal translator device. The Vorthok warriors looked at each other in confusion. One of them was bleeding from a head wound, and another had a broken arm, but they still tried to look dangerous and threatening. Largest Vorthok warrior stepped forward and spoke in a deep growling voice. "Why do you help us humans? We are your enemies. We have killed your people and burned your colonies. You should leave us here to die like the weak prey you are." Daeho looked at the alien warrior and felt anger rising in his chest. This creature might have been one of the ones who attacked his sister's colony. This warrior might have been there when human children were killed and human families were destroyed, but he pushed down his anger and remembered why he was here. "Because you were hurt and we are here to help," he said simply. "That is what humans do." Medical technician Yen Su stepped forward with her medical kit. She began treating the wounded warriors while they watched in amazement. She used precious human medical supplies to clean their wounds and stop their bleeding. She worked on creatures who had probably killed humans, just like Hertha Vorthok with the head wound stared at Yan Su as she bandaged his injury. "Why do you waste your supplies on us?" he asked. "Your people need these medicines." "We are nothing to you because you are hurt, and I am a doctor," she replied while continuing to work. "That is all that matters right now." While Yan Su treated the wounded warriors, Minho and Tae-Hoon used their tools to cut through the metal beam that blocked the doorway. It took 20 minutes of hard work, but they finally made an opening big enough for the Vorthok to escape. The warriors were amazed that humans would work so hard to save them in their culture. The strong conquered the weak, and the weak died. There was no middle ground and no mercy for enemies. But these humans were showing them something they had never experienced before as they helped the Vorthok warriors to the shuttle. Daeho received radio calls from the other rescue teams. All over the dying ship, his crew members were risking their lives to save alien beings who had been their enemies just a few hours ago. Team Beta had reached the engineering section where they found 12 Vorthok engineers trapped by a power conduit that had exploded. Engineer Ki Wu had crawled through burning wreckage to reach them, even though the whole section could have collapsed at any moment. Team Gamma was working in the most dangerous part of the ship where the hull had been torn open. Pilot Jong-sik flew his shuttle into areas that were actively venting atmosphere to pull out survivors who could not reach the safe zones. The alien ship was shaking itself apart, but he kept going back for more people. Medical Officer Hai Jin had set up an emergency treatment center in the Unity cargo bay. She worked on Vorthok after Vorthok, treating injuries that would have been fatal. Without immediate help, she used up most of their medical supplies in the first hour, but she never stopped working. The rescued Vorthok could not understand what was happening to them. They had been taught that showing mercy was a sign of weakness that led to death, but these humans had shown them mercy and were still alive. More than that, the humans seemed to get stronger when they helped others. One young Vorthok engineer asked Kiwoo why he had risked his life to save someone who was supposed to be his enemy. Kiwoo was bandaging a burn on his own arm that he had gotten during the rescue, but he just smiled and said, "Because you needed help and I could give Itaz." The rescue continued. The Vorthok began to realize that these humans were different from anything they had ever encountered. Human rescue teams kept going back into the collapsing ship, even when it was clearly dangerous. They shared their food and water with aliens who had never shown them any kindness. Security officer Tae-Hyun nearly died when a support wall collapsed while he was helping a group of Vorthok children escape from a damaged classroom. The children were small versions of the adult warriors, but they were scared and crying just like human children would. Beatty adult Vorthok watched in shock as Tae-Hyun used his own body to shield the children from falling debris. He got badly hurt, but he made sure every child got to safety before he let anyone help him. When the Vorthok asked him why, he said, "Because they are just kids and kids should not have to be afraid." 6 hours after the rescue began, the alien ship finally broke apart completely. The massive vessel split into 3 pieces and then exploded in a bright flash of light, but by then, every living Vorthok had been brought safely aboard the human ships. Over 300 alien beings had been saved from certain death. Not a single human had complained about the danger or suggested that they should abandon the mission. When the final shuttle returned to the Unity, the human crew was exhausted, and many were injured, but they had accomplished something impossible. The rescued Vorthok were crowded into every available space on the human ships. They sat in cargo holds and corridors, looking around in confusion and amazement. They had been saved by the very creatures they had been taught to despise and destroy. Many of the Vorthok warriors began to question everything they had been told about humans. These small bipedal creatures had shown them a kind of strength they had never seen before. It was not the strength to destroy enemies, but the strength to save them. As the Unity prepared to head back to human space, Captain Daeho looked at the alien survivors and wondered what would happen next. He had saved them because it was the right thing to do, but he had no idea that this single act of kindness would change the entire galaxy forever. The news of what Captain Daeho and his crew had done spread across the galaxy faster than the fastest starships could travel. Communication networks carried the story from one star system to another, and within days every major alien civilization had heard about the impossible rescue on the Vorthok homeworld of Kethra. The rescued warriors were brought before the High Council in chains. The council expected to hear a normal report about a failed raid or a battle lost to human forces, but instead they heard something that made no sense according to everything they knew about war and survival. Commander Dekvar stood before the council, still wearing bandages from his injuries. He had been one of the warriors trapped in the training room when the humans found him. He was a veteran of 50 battles and had killed more humans than he could count. But now he had to tell his leaders something that sounded impossible. "The humans saved us," he said in a voice that shook with emotion. "They risked their lives to pull us from a dying ship. They used their own medical supplies to heal our wounds. They shared their food and water with us when they could have let us die." The council members looked at each other in confusion. High Commander Zethka was the oldest and most experienced warrior in the Empire. He had been fighting humans for years and thought he understood them completely, but this story made no sense to him. "You must be mistaken," he said with a growl. "Humans are weak, prey animals. They only understand fear and pain. If they saved you, it was because they wanted to use you as bargaining tools or torture you for information." But Dakvar shook his head. "No, High Commander. They asked for nothing in return. They did not even ask us questions about our military plans. One of their doctors spent hours treating my wounds, and when I asked her why, she said it was because I was hurt and she was a healer. Another rescued warrior named Vectool stepped forward. He had been badly burned when the power conduits exploded in the engineering section. Engineer Ki Wu had crawled through fire to reach him and had gotten injured while pulling him to safety. The human who saved me got hurt trying to help me. Vectool said he could have left me there and saved himself, but he did not. He said that no one deserves to die alone and afraid. These humans have something we do not understand. They can feel the pain of their enemies. The High Council listened to story after story from the rescued Vorthok. Each tale was more confusing than the last humans who shared their last rations with hungry alien prisoners, doctors who used expensive medicines on creatures who had killed their friends, pilots who flew into exploding ships to save people they had never met. Yonhera Zon had been just a child when the human rescue teams found her trapped in the damaged classroom. She told the council how security officer Taehun had used his own body to protect her from falling debris. Even though he got badly hurt, the human male was bleeding, but he made sure I was safe first, she said with tears in her large yellow eyes. He carried me to the shuttle and told me stories to keep me from being scared. He said that all children deserve to be protected no matter where they come from. The council sat in stunned silence for a long time. They had built their entire civilization on the idea that strength meant the ability to destroy enemies, but these humans had shown a different kind of strength, the strength to save enemies even when it cost them dearly. High Commander Zethka finally spoke in a quiet voice that was very different from his usual commanding tone. These humans possess a weapon we cannot defeat with our claws or our ships. They can turn enemies into allies without firing a single shot. How do we fight against an enemy that saves our lives? That story spread beyond the Vorthok Empire to other alien civilizations. The Crystalline Collective was a race of living crystal beings who had been planning to invade human space. They believed that organic life forms were chaotic and dangerous and needed to be controlled or destroyed, but when they heard about the rescue there, Queen Crystal Shah called an emergency meeting of the ruling stones. The collective had studied human behavior for years and had concluded that humans were typical aggressive mammals who could only be dealt with through superior force. This changes everything, Queen Shah announced to the assembly. Her crystalline voice rang like musical chimes through the crystal chambers. If humans can show mercy to their worst enemies, then perhaps they are not the savage beasts we believed them. Two Beatty hive mind species consisted of billions of insect-like creatures that shared a single consciousness. They had written off humans as individual-minded chaos bringers who could never achieve true unity. But the rescue made them reconsider their analysis. The humans acted as one mind to save their enemies, the Hive Queen transmitted to all her children. This shows a level of species cooperation that we did not think individualistic beings could achieve. Perhaps we have underestimated these mammals on Earth. The human government was receiving angry messages from military commanders across the galaxy. Admiral Park Jin-woo of the Mars Defense Fleet sent a furious communication to the Unity when they returned. Home Captain Daeho, you have made humanity look weak in front of every alien species in the galaxy, he said during the video call. The Vorthok have killed thousands of our people, and now you show them mercy. What message does this send to other potential enemies? But Admiral Yan-woo of the Human Defense Fleet disagreed. She had been studying the reports from across alien space, and she could see something that the other commanders missed. The rescue had not made humans look weak, it had made them look like something much more dangerous. Admiral Park, you are not seeing the bigger picture, she said during a council meeting. The aliens are not laughing at us for showing mercy. They are terrified because they cannot understand it. Every military strategist in the galaxy is trying to figure out how to defend against an enemy that turns hatred into friendship. Dar Yoon-suk was a human scientist who studied alien psychology. She was called to address the Galactic Council, which was an organization of different alien species that tried to keep peace in the galaxy. The council wanted to understand what had happened and why it was causing such chaos across civilized space. And our delegates, she said as she stood before representatives of 40 different alien species, you are witnessing something that most civilizations never develop until they achieve true galactic peace. Humans have evolved a trait called empathy. The alien representatives listened with their various ears, tentacles, and sensor organs. As she continued, when humans see suffering, we do not ask if the being deserves our help. We do not calculate the strategic advantage of offering aid. We simply help because we cannot bear to watch others in pain. A delegate from the insectoid swarms clicked his mandibles in confusion. But it makes no evolutionary sense. Why would a species waste resources on enemies that could kill them later? This empathy sounds like a genetic defect that should have been eliminated long ago. Dar Yoon-suk smiled. That is exactly what makes it so powerful. You see, when humans help their enemies, those enemies remember the gratitude and confusion they feel often transforms them into allies. It is not a conscious strategy, it is simply who we are as a species. The Galactic Council spent 3 days debating the implications of human empathy. Some species wanted to exploit what they saw as a weakness, others wanted to study it as a potential military advantage, but a few began to wonder if maybe the humans had discovered something important. The ripple Effects continued to spread across the galaxy. Young Vorthok, who had grown up hating humans, began to ask questions about the stories their elders told them. Universities on dozens of worlds started offering courses on human psychology and ethics. Negotiations that had been stalled for years suddenly started moving forward as alien species realized that humans could be trusted to keep their word, even when it cost them. Military alliances shifted as former enemies began to see humans as potential partners rather than threats. But the biggest change was happening in the hearts and minds of individual beings across the galaxy. Soldiers who had been taught to hate were beginning to question whether violence was always the answer. Scientists were studying the practical benefits of cooperation over conquest. Politicians were wondering if empathy might be a better foundation for civilization than fear. The rescue of 300 Vorthok warriors had become something much larger. It had become proof that there was another way to live in a dangerous galaxy instead of building bigger weapons and stronger shields. Maybe civilizations could build bridges of understanding and walls of compassion. As reports continued to flow in from across known space, it became clear that Captain Deho and his crew had done more than save lives. They had planted seeds of change that were growing into something that could transform the entire galaxy, and they had done it not through conquest or force but through the simple human act of helping someone who needed it. 6 months after the rescue, Captain Deho received a message that shocked him more than anything else in his military career. The message came through official diplomatic channels and was written in perfect human language, but it was signed by High Commander Zeth K of the Vorthok Empire. Captain Deho. The message read, "The Vorthok Empire formally requests a meeting to discuss terms for a permanent peace treaty between our peoples. We wish to meet on neutral ground to negotiate an end to all hostilities. Your actions have shown us that there may be another way to resolve our differences." Deho read the message 3 times before he could believe it was real. The Vorthok had been humanity's worst enemy for 5 years. They had destroyed human colonies and enslaved human prisoners. They had shown no mercy to anyone they defeated, but now they wanted to talk about peace. The human government was divided about how to respond. Some military leaders thought it was a trap designed to make humans lower their guard. Other politicians worried that negotiating with the Vorthok would make humanity look weak to other alien species. But Admiral Yeon Woo supported the peace talks. She had been watching the reports from across the galaxy and could see that something fundamental was changing. The rescue had created a chain reaction that was transforming how different species viewed conflict and cooperation. The meeting was arranged to take place on Station Harmony, which was a neutral space station run by the Galactic Council. It was located in empty space between human and Vorthok territory, so neither side would have a military advantage. When Deho arrived at the station, he was amazed to see that the Vorthok delegation was led by the same warriors he had rescued from the dying ship commander. Vekvar was there, along with engineer Vektool and several others who had been saved by human cruisers. Vorthok looked different somehow. They still had their reptilian features, an impressive size, but something had changed in their eyes. They no longer looked at humans with the hatred and contempt that had defined their species for so long. High Commander Zethka stepped forward and did something that no Vorthok had ever done before. He bowed his head to a human in a gesture of respect. "Captain Deho," he said in his deep voice, "you and your crew have taught us something that our warriors could not learn through 1,000 battles." "What is that?" Deho asked, feeling strange about having such a powerful enemy show him respect. "That true strength is not the ability to destroy enemies, but the ability to save them," Zethka replied. "Your people showed mercy when we deserved none. You risked your lives for beings who had killed your friends and family. That is a power we cannot match with our weapons." The peace negotiations lasted for 2 weeks and were unlike any diplomatic meeting in galactic history. Instead of arguing about territory and resources, the discussions focused on understanding and forgiveness. The Vorthok delegation spoke openly about their regret for the attacks on human colonies. Commander Vakvar stood before the human representatives and said something that brought tears to many eyes. "We have committed terrible crimes against your people. We destroyed your homes and took your children. We turned your loved ones into entertainment in our arenas. We do not deserve your forgiveness, but we are asking for it anyway." The human delegation was led by Ambassador Lee Minjung, who had lost her own family in the attack on New Seoul Station. She had every reason to hate the Vorthok, but she had also been inspired by what Captain Deho and his crew had accomplished. "The path to peace is not easy," she said, "but it is the only path that leads to a better future for both our peoples. We accept your request for forgiveness and we offer our own commitment to building a new relationship based on mutual respect." The peace treaty was signed in a ceremony that was broadcast across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of alien species watched as former enemies became allies. The document was signed not just by government officials but by the actual people who had been part of the rescue and had experienced the transformation firsthand. Captain Deho was promoted to admiral and became the first human to receive the Vorthok Medal of Honor, which was their highest military decoration. The medal was made from a rare crystal that could only be found on the Vorthok homeworld and was traditionally given only to warriors who had shown extraordinary courage in battle. But the changes went much deeper than official ceremonies. Young Vorthok began studying human philosophy and ethics in their schools. Military academies that are taught only conquest and domination started offering courses on diplomacy and peaceful conflict resolution. The Vorthok scientist Heknar published a research paper called The Strategic Advantages of Compassion, which analyzed how empathy could be more effective than violence in achieving long-term goals. The paper became required reading in military schools across the galaxy. Other alien species were watching the human-Vorthok alliance with great interest. The Crystalline Collective decided to try their own experiment in showing mercy to their enemies. When they encountered the hostile slag miners who had been raiding their territory, they offered aid instead of destruction. The results were remarkable. The slag miners, who had been attacking crystal ships for decades, suddenly found themselves receiving medical help and food supplies from the very beings they had been trying to destroy. Within months, the raids stopped and the slag miners became trading partners with the collective. The insectoid swarms began developing what they called compassion protocols. When they encountered hostile species, they would send aid ships instead of war fleets. The swarms discovered that many conflicts were caused by desperation and fear rather than true aggression. Quenzara, hiss of the insectoid swarms, made an announcement that shocked her entire species. We have learned from the humans that sometimes the best way to defeat an enemy is to turn them into a friend. This requires courage, but it also requires wisdom. The machine collective, which consisted of artificial intelligences that had dismissed biological emotions as inefficient, began to study the practical benefits of empathy. Their analysis showed that species with highly developed empathy had more stable societies and were better at forming lasting alliances. The changes were not limited to governments and military organizations. Individual beings across the galaxy were beginning to question their assumptions about conflict and cooperation. Young aliens who had grown up expecting to fight wars were now learning about negotiation and understanding. On the Vorthok homeworld, statues were erected to honor the human rescue teams. Parks and schools were named after Captain Deho and his crew. Children who had been taught to hate humans were now learning about the day when humans chose to save their enemies instead of destroying them. The transformation was happening on human worlds. To the families of people who had been killed in Vorthok attacks were struggling to understand forgiveness. Some found it impossible to let go of their anger and pain, but others were inspired by the example of mercy that had changed the galaxy. To Yar, Kim Seiron, who had lost her husband in the Mars colony attack, wrote a book called The Courage to Forgive. She described her own journey from hatred to understanding and how she had learned that forgiveness was not about forgetting the past, but about choosing to build a better future. The book became a bestseller across dozens of worlds and was translated into hundreds of alien languages. It helped many beings understand that showing mercy was not weakness, but a form of strength that required more courage than violence. Admiral Deho now commanded a fleet that included both human and Vorthok ships working together. The crews had to learn to trust each other and work as a team despite their history of conflict. It was not easy, but it was possible. Navigation officer Su Jin now worked alongside Vorthok navigators who had once been her enemies. Engineer Ki Wu collaborated with Vorthok engineers to develop new technologies that neither species that could have created a lone medical officer. Hyjin trained doctors from both species to work together in emergency situations. The transformation that had begun with a single act of mercy was spreading across the galaxy like ripples in a pond. Each act of kindness inspired others to choose compassion over revenge. Each gesture of forgiveness opened new possibilities for cooperation and understanding. The galaxy was learning that the greatest victories were not won through conquest but through the courage to show mercy to those who had shown none. The weapon that had shaken the foundations of galactic civilization was not made of metal or energy, but of the simple human tendency to help others even when they did not deserve it. 5 years had passed since the rescue that changed everything, and Admiral Deho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Mercy, looking out at a galaxy that had been transformed beyond recognition. The ship itself was a symbol of how much you had changed. It was built using both human and Vorthok technology and crewed by beings from 12 different species working together. Bridge was larger than the old Unity and had stations designed for different types of alien physiology. Su Jin still served as his navigation officer, but now she worked alongside Dekvar, the former Vorthok warrior who had become an expert in peaceful first contact procedures. The Mercy was not a warship despite its impressive size and advanced technology. It was designed for rescue operations, diplomatic missions, and humanitarian aid. The weapon systems were minimal and used only for defense against pirates and other criminals. Admiral Deho, we are receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim sector, reported Commander Yara Jin, who was a member of the Crystalline Collective. The signal appears to be from an unknown species, and this could be a first contact situation. Deho smiled as he looked at his diverse crew. The bridge was staffed by humans, Vorthok, crystal beings, insectoid creatures, and even 2 artificial intelligences from the Machine Collective. All of them had once been enemies or strangers, but now they worked together like a family. What kind of distress are they reporting? He asked while settling into his command chair. The chair had been modified to accommodate his human physiology, but the control systems could be operated by any of the species on his crew. The signal is weak and difficult to translate, but it appears their ship has suffered catastrophic damage, Commander Yara Jin replied. Her crystalline form flickered as she processed the incoming data. There are approximately 800 life forms aboard, and their life support systems are failing. Daho felt the familiar stirring in his heart that had driven him to rescue the Vorthok 5 years ago. Somewhere in the darkness of space, beings were dying and afraid. They needed help, and it did not matter what species they were or whether they were friends or enemies. Prepare all rescue teams and set course for the distress signal, he ordered. Medical teams, engineering teams, and first contact specialists to their stations. This is what we do. The crew moved with practiced efficiency that came from years of working together. Dr. Hai Jin now served as chief medical officer for the entire galactic peacekeeping force, and she had trained medical teams from dozens of species. Ki Wu had become the chief engineer and had developed new rescue technologies that could save lives in the most dangerous situations. As the Mercy jumped to hyperspace, Daho reflected on how much the galaxy had changed. The Human Vorthok Alliance had become the foundation for something much larger. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force was an organization of former enemies who had learned to work together for the common good. The rescue missions had become routine over the years, but they never became boring. Every time they saved lives, they were planting seeds that could grow into something beautiful. Species that had been isolated or hostile began to see that there were alternatives to violence and conquests. The Crystalline Collective had completely transformed their approach to dealing with other species. Instead of trying to control or destroy chaotic organic life, they now offered help and guidance. The crystal beings had discovered that cooperation produced better results than domination. The insectoid swarms had developed their compassion protocols into a sophisticated system for turning conflicts into partnerships when they encountered hostile species. They would study the root causes of the aggression and address those problems directly. Quinzara Hiss had established the first interspecies academy where young beings from different civilizations could learn together. The academy taught not just science and technology, but also empathy and understanding. The graduates went on to become ambassadors and peacekeepers across the galaxy. Machine Collective had surprised everyone by becoming some of the most effective mediators in the galaxy. Their artificial intelligences could analyze conflicts without emotional bias, but they had also learned to understand and work with biological emotions. I.e. Unit Theta 7 had published a research paper called The Mathematics of Mercy, which proved that compassionate societies were more efficient and stable than those based on fear and domination. The paper had become required reading in universities across dozens of worlds, but the most dramatic changes had happened among the Vorthok themselves. The warrior culture that had dominated their civilization for thousands of years had evolved into something completely different. They still valued strength and courage, but now they defined those qualities in new ways. Young Vorthok were taught that the greatest warriors were those who could turn enemies into allies. Without fighting, children learned stories about the human rescue teams who had risked their lives to save Vorthok survivors. Schools taught courses on diplomacy and conflict resolution alongside traditional combat training. The Vorthok military academies had established the Order of the Open Claw, which was the lead unit of warriors trained in rescue operations and humanitarian aid. These Vorthok soldiers were deployed to disaster zones and conflict areas where they worked to save lives and build peace. Commander Thekvar had become the leader of the Order and had trained hundreds of young Vorthok in the principles that he had learned from humans. "We do not measure our strengths by how many enemies we can kill," he would tell his students. "We measure it by how many lives we can save." The transformation had not been easy or complete. There were still species in the galaxy that preferred conquest to cooperation. Some alien civilizations continued to view mercy as weakness and tried to exploit the peaceful intentions of others. The Devourer horde still swept through the outer rim, consuming everything in their path. The Shadow Collective continued to operate from the dark spaces between stars, spreading fear and chaos wherever they went. These hostile forces served as a reminder that the galaxy could still be a dangerous place, but even these threats were being handled differently now. Instead of meeting violence with greater violence, the Galactic Peacekeeping Force tried to understand what drove these hostile species. They offered alternatives and tried to address the root causes of aggression. Some of the smaller raider groups had actually been converted into allies when they discovered that cooperation was more profitable than piracy. The former pirates now worked as escorts and security forces, protecting peaceful traders and explorers. The Mercy dropped out of hyperspace near a massive alien vessel that was clearly in distress. This ship was unlike anything in the databases. It was organic in appearance, with a hull that it looked like it was grown rather than built. Sections of the ship were clearly dying and the whole structure was listing badly. "Admiral, this appears to be a living ship," reported sensor specialist Keth Nor, who was a Vorthok engineer. "The entire vessel is actually a single massive organism and it is severely injured. We are detecting 800 smaller life forms inside, but they appear to be trapped." Daho studied the readings and felt his heart go out to the unknown beings inside the ship. Creature was beautiful in its own alien way, but it was clearly suffering. The smaller life forms inside were probably the crew or passengers, and they were in danger as their living vessel died. Launch all rescue shuttles and prepare the medical bays, he ordered. This is going to be our most challenging rescue yet. We need to save both the ship creature and the beings inside it. The rescue operation took 12 hours and required the combined skills of every species on the crew. The living ship was dying from some kind of disease that was destroying its internal organs. Dr. Hyjin worked with crystalline healers and Vorthok bioengineers to develop a treatment. Meanwhile, rescue teams cut carefully into the ship creature to reach the trapped beings inside. They discovered a species of small furry creatures who looked like a cross between cats and birds. The beings were terrified and had never seen aliens before. The universal translators struggled with their language, but the rescue teams used gentle gestures and patient care to show that they meant no harm. Medical officer John Essio, who was part of the rescue team, later said that the moment when the alien children stopped being afraid was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. The living ship was saved through a combination of human medical techniques, Vorthok bioengineering, and crystalline energy healing. The small furry beings, who called themselves the Kethani, were amazed that strangers from the stars that had worked so hard to help them. Elder Flicktar, who was the leader of the Kethani, spoke to Admiral Deho through the translator device. "Why did you risk your lives to save us? We are not your people and we have nothing to give you in return." Deho smiled and gave the same answer he had given to the Vorthok 5 years ago: "Because you needed help and we could give it. That is what we do." Rescue of the Kethani became another story that spread across the galaxy. The small furry beings became some of the most enthusiastic supporters of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. They established the first interspecies children exchange program where young beings from different worlds could learn about other cultures as the Mercy prepared to escort the healed living ship back to Kethani space. Deho reflected on how far they had all come. The galaxy was not perfect and there were still conflicts and problems to solve, but it was a much better place